I'm going to keep it straight, this isn't a hype-driven unboxing, it's a look at whether the ASUS Pro WRX80 ASUG's Wi-Fi II actually makes sense for a professional build or if it's just another pricey slab that ends up on the shelf. If you're on the fence about spending a chunk of your budget on a high-end workstation board, this review should give you a clearer picture of the real-world trade-offs. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. First off, the biggest source of hesitation for most buyers is the sheer cost versus the actual need for a Threadripper Pro platform. The WRX80 socket is designed for 8-channel memory, up to 256 GB of RAM, and a massive I/O layout. If you're a solo freelancer editing 8K video, running massive simulations, or compiling large codebases nightly, that kind of bandwidth can shave minutes or even hours off your workflow. But if your day-to-day tasks are CAD files in the low hundreds of megabytes or a standard 3D render farm that already runs fine on a mainstream Ryzen 9, the extra expense might not translate into noticeable time savings. When I pulled the board out of its box, the first thing that struck me was the layout. ASUS has packed the Extended-ATX board with 7 PCIe 5.0 x 16 slots, 2 of which are reinforced for heavy GPUs. That's a genuine advantage if you plan to run dual or triple GPU setups for deep learning, real-time ray tracing, or high-throughput rendering. In practice, I tested a dual GPU configuration with an RTX 4090 and an RTX A6000. The board handled the power draw without throttling, and the BIOS automatically balanced lane distribution, so I didn't have to dive into manual tweaking. For anyone who needs that kind of GPU density, the slot arrangement is a solid win. On the networking side, the integrated Wi-Fi 6E and 10 gigabits Ethernet combo is more than a convenience, it's a practical fallback if your office LAN isn't ready for 10 gigabits yet. In a real-world scenario, I ran large file transfers between 2 workstations, one on 10 gigabits Ethernet, the other on Wi-Fi 6E. The wireless link topped out at around 2.5 gigabits per second, which is impressive for a wireless connection and sufficient for moving a 200 GB project overnight. If your workflow involves frequent large dataset imports from the cloud, that built-in Wi-Fi can shave out a lot of waiting time without needing a separate adapter. One of the more subtle, yet incredibly useful, features is the ASMB 9 IKVM remote management module. It's essentially a dedicated BMC, baseboard management controller, that lets you control the machine at the hardware level over the network, even when the OS isn't booted. For a workstation that lives in a rack or a remote office, this means you can push BIOS updates, reflash firmware, or troubleshoot a frozen system without physically stepping in front of it. I used it to update the BIOS after the first week of heavy workload, and it took a couple of minutes from my laptop, no need to schedule a site visit. That kind of remote hands-on capability is usually reserved for server-grade hardware, so seeing it on a workstation board is a genuine value add. Now, let's talk about the practical downsides. The first is power consumption. The board alone draws around 30 W at idle, and when you populate it with 2 high-end GPUs and a handful of NVMe drives, the total draw can hover near 600 W under load. That means you'll need a robust PSU at least 1000 W with an 80+ platinum rating to stay in the safe zone. For a small office or a home lab, that adds another sizable line item to the budget, and you also have to consider the heat output. I noticed the VRM heatsinks ran hot enough that the case fans had to spin up aggressively, which could be a noise issue if you're in a quiet editing suite. Another hidden trade-off is the learning curve. The BIOS is packed with options tailored for professional workloads, NUMA settings, PCIe bifurcation, memory interleaving, and so on. While ASUS provides a decent manual, it assumes a degree of familiarity with enterprise-grade tuning. In my initial setup, I spent a couple of hours tweaking the memory timings to get the full 3200 MHz speed on a 128 GB kit. If you're not comfortable digging into those settings, you might end up with suboptimal performance or, worse, stability issues. It's not a plug-and-play board for the average gamer. From a cost-benefit perspective, the value really comes from the combination of features that address specific professional needs. The 8-channel memory support, the extensive PCIe lane count, the built-in remote management, and the high-speed networking all add up to a platform that can handle the most demanding workloads without needing additional add-in cards. If you're building a workstation that will sit in a server rack, run multiple GPUs, and require remote access for IT teams, that integration saves both money and space compared to buying separate NICs, KVM switches, and PCIe expanders. Who should buy this board? Think of people who already know they need the Threadripper Pro ecosystem. That includes visual effects studios, scientific research labs, architecture firms that run multi-threaded simulations, and AI developers training models on multiple GPUs. If you're software,